My name is Beulah, and I'm 53 years old. As a mother, your child's birthday should be one of the happiest days of your life. That's what I thought as I prepared for Jackson's 21st birthday celebration. I paid for half the party, picked his favorite restaurant, and spent hours baking his childhood cake recipe. But when I arrived, I discovered the truth about where I stood in my son's life. The seat next to him was saved for his stepmom. Even their dog had a spot. If you're watching from somewhere you've felt overlooked before, drop a like and subscribe. Sometimes, the quietest people have the most powerful stories to tell. And mine started the moment I realized where I truly stood in my son's life. Harold and I were married for 25 years before everything fell apart. We built what I thought was a beautiful life together, centered around our only son, Jackson. From the moment he was born, that boy was my whole world. I still remember his tiny fingers wrapped around mine in the hospital, how his eyes would follow me around the room, and the way he'd only settle when I held him. Those early years were magical. Jackson was a curious, bright child who loved dinosaurs, building blocks, and bedtime stories. Every night without fail, I'd tuck him in with his favorite stuffed triceratops and read until his eyes grew heavy. Harold worked long hours at his accounting firm back then. So many of these precious moments were just between Jackson and me. When Jackson turned 7, Harold's firm promoted him to senior partner. The salary increase meant we could finally afford the beautiful 2-story colonial house in the good school district that we'd always dreamed about. Life seemed perfect then. I volunteered at Jackson's elementary school, chaperoned field trips, and never missed a single soccer game. Harold and I had our issues like any couple, but I truly believed we were solid. The first sign of trouble came during Jackson's freshman year of high school. Harold started working late more frequently, sometimes not coming home until after midnight. When he was home, he was distracted, constantly checking his phone. I told myself it was work pressure, but deep down, I sensed something had changed. The truth came out on a random Tuesday when I stopped by Harold's office to surprise him with lunch. Instead, I was the one surprised when his receptionist mentioned he'd taken the afternoon off. When I called his cell, it went straight to voicemail. That night, I confronted him, and after hours of denial, he finally admitted he was having an affair with Amanda, a 32-year-old financial analyst who had joined his firm the previous year. I was devastated. For weeks, I cried myself to sleep, lost weight, and barely functioned. Jackson, 15 at the time, was caught in the middle. He heard our arguments, saw my puffy eyes every morning, and watched as his father packed his things and moved into an apartment across town. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Harold hired an aggressive attorney who painted me as an unambitious housewife who had contributed nothing to our financial success. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, Harold married Amanda. The speed of it was like a second betrayal. Jackson was initially angry with his father, refusing to stay at Harold's new house during his scheduled visitations. But Amanda was clever. She bought Jackson expensive gifts, took an interest in his hobbies, and never tried to discipline him. Gradually, I watched my son's loyalty shift. Our modest 2-bedroom apartment couldn't compete with Harold and Amanda's 5-bedroom house with a pool. My part-time job at the library barely covered our expenses while Harold and Amanda took luxury vacations and bought Jackson a car for his 16th birthday. I couldn't blame my son for being drawn to the lifestyle they offered, but it hurt to see him pulling away from me. The family dog, Rusty, a golden retriever we had adopted when Jackson was 10, stayed with Harold after the divorce. The courts consider pets property, and since Harold paid for most of Rusty's expenses, he got to keep him. Jackson was heartbroken initially, but since he spent weekends at Harold's house, he still got to see Rusty regularly. Eventually, Rusty became another reason Jackson preferred being at his father's house. Despite everything, I tried to maintain my relationship with my son. I attended every school event, celebrated his accomplishments, and kept his room exactly as he liked it for the weekends he stayed with me. I picked up extra shifts at the library and took on freelance proofreading work to afford the things he needed, There were many nights I went to bed hungry, so Jackson could have the name brand clothes his friends wore, or money for movie tickets and pizza. Through it all, I never spoke badly about Harold or Amanda. I swallowed my pain and encouraged Jackson to have a good relationship with them. "They're your family too," I'd tell him, even as the words tasted bitter in my mouth. I believed that by taking the high road, Jackson would eventually see and appreciate my sacrifice. Looking back, I realize my quiet acceptance may have taught him that it was okay to push me into the background of his life. When Jackson's 21st birthday approached, I saw it as an opportunity to strengthen our bond. This milestone birthday seemed like the perfect chance to remind him of our special connection, to show him that despite everything, my love had never wavered. I called Jackson in early April, 2 months before his birthday, to discuss celebration plans. He seemed genuinely excited when I suggested organizing something special. "That would be awesome, Mom," he said, and for a moment I heard the warmth in his voice that had been missing for so long. The very next day, I received a text from Jackson that made my heart sink. "Dad and Amanda are planning something big for my birthday. They're thinking about renting out the Boathouse." The Boathouse was an upscale restaurant overlooking the lake, far beyond what I could afford on my budget. I called Jackson immediately. "I thought we were planning something together," I said, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "I know, Mom, but they already put down a deposit," he explained. "But maybe we could do something small, just you and me, the weekend before." That something small felt like being relegated to the understudy role in my own son's life, but I agreed. A week later, though, Harold called me directly, which was unusual. "Beulah, Amanda, and I have been talking about Jackson's birthday." He began, his tone businesslike as always. "We think it makes more sense to have one big celebration rather than splitting things up." Jackson agrees. "We'd like you to join us at the Boathouse." I knew what this meant. They would host Take Credit, and I would be a guest at my own son's birthday party. But what choice did I have? "Of course," I said. "I'd love to contribute. What can I do to help?" Harold hesitated before saying, "Well, these events at the Boathouse aren't cheap. If you wanted to chip in for the cost, that would be helpful." He named a figure that represented nearly 2 months of my disposable income. I agreed without hesitation. I would have given anything for Jackson, even if it meant eating ramen noodles for the rest of the summer. What Harold didn't know was that I had been saving for months, putting aside a little from each paycheck, hoping to take Jackson on a special weekend trip for his birthday. Instead, that money would now go toward a party where I would likely be an afterthought. The following weeks were filled with planning calls and texts, but increasingly I noticed Amanda taking control. She created a group chat for coordinating details, but somehow I was left off most important decisions. When I suggested the Olive Garden, which had been Jackson's favorite restaurant since childhood, Amanda diplomatically pointed out that the Boathouse was more appropriate for such an important milestone. Still, I tried to carve out my own contribution. "I'd like to bake Jackson's cake," I offered during one of the planning calls. "I still have his grandmother's recipe for the chocolate raspberry cake he always loved for his birthdays." Amanda's voice was sweet as honey when she replied, "That's so thoughtful, Beulah, but we've already ordered a custom cake from that bakery downtown. It's going to have this amazing design with his college logo and everything. But maybe you could bring some of those cookies Jackson likes." Each conversation left me feeling smaller, less significant in my own son's life. My phone calls with Jackson became shorter and more practical. "Mom, Amanda wanted me to ask if you could pick up some extra decorations." Or, "Hey, can you make sure to wear something blue? Amanda's planning a color theme." The night before I went shopping for Jackson's gift, I stayed up looking through old photo albums. There was Jackson at 5, grinning with chocolate cake all over his face. Jackson at 10, proudly showing off the science fair ribbon I had helped him earn. Jackson at 16, awkwardly handsome in his prom tuxedo, allowing me one quick picture before rushing off with his date. Where had that boy gone? When had I become an obligation rather than a joy to him? These questions haunted me as I drifted off to sleep, the photo album still open beside me. The next day, I visited 6 different stores before finding the perfect gift. It was a vintage pocket watch, similar to one my father had given Harold when we married. Harold had lost it years ago, but Jackson had always admired it. The watch cost more than I should have spent, but I had it engraved with a simple message: "Time moves forward, but love remains. Always, Mom." As I wrapped the small box in silver paper, I imagined Jackson opening it, recognizing the significance, and perhaps remembering all the times I had been there for him, steadfast and loving, even when it wasn't convenient or Instagram-worthy. Little did I know how differently things would turn out, or how that small silver box would come to represent not just my love, but my dignity. The day before Jackson's birthday, my anxiety reached a fever pitch. I had already picked up my dress from the dry cleaner, a navy blue sheath that was several years old, but still elegant. I hoped it would be appropriate for the Boathouse, a venue I had never visited due to its exclusive prices. That morning, I spent 3 hours at Supercuts, where Denise, my regular stylist, worked magic with my graying hair. "Special occasion?" she asked as she applied color to cover the silver strands. "My son's 21st birthday," I replied with pride. "That's wonderful. He must be excited to celebrate with his mom." I nodded, not wanting to explain the complicated reality of our relationship. After the salon, I made one last trip to the mall to find earrings that would match my dress. As I browsed the jewelry counter at the department store, my phone rang. It was Jackson. "Mom, just checking that you're still bringing those extra napkins and the photo display right." "Yes, of course," I assured him. "I've got everything ready." There was an awkward pause before he continued. "Great. Oh, and Amanda wanted me to remind you that we're starting at 6, not 6:30. "I have it on my calendar for 6, I said, feeling a twinge of annoyance that Amanda assumed I would be late or forgetful. "Perfect. Also, Dad's parents are coming, and his sister Katie with her husband and kids. And Amanda's parents, too." This was news to me. The guest list had grown considerably from what I'd been told initially. I wondered if my contribution to the party cost would increase accordingly, but I didn't ask. Instead, I said, "That's wonderful. It will be nice to see everyone." After we hung up, I received a text message from Amanda. "Hi, Beulah. Just FYI, we've arranged the seating chart. There will be place cards so everyone knows where to sit." I stared at the message for a long moment. Something about it sent a chill down my spine, but I replied with a simple, "Sounds great. Thanks for letting me know." That evening, I stayed up until midnight baking Jackson's favorite cake, despite knowing that the fancy bakery cake would be the centerpiece of the celebration. I couldn't help myself. Making this cake was a tradition, one of the few connections to the past that I still maintained. The rich smell of chocolate filled my small apartment as I carefully spread the raspberry filling between the layers. When I finally went to bed, exhaustion competed with anticipation. Tomorrow would be a significant day, not just for Jackson, but for me as well. I had spent over 21 years defining myself primarily as Jackson's mom. Each birthday marked not just his growth, but my journey as a mother. Despite all the changes, despite Harold and Amanda, despite the growing distance, I still held tightly to that identity. As I drifted off to sleep, my phone chimed with a text. It was from my friend Sarah, the only person from my married life who had remained steadfastly in my corner after the divorce. "Good luck tomorrow," her message read. "Remember, you're still his mother no matter what. No one can take that away from you." I fell asleep, clutching the phone, Sarah's words providing a comfort I desperately needed. The day of Jackson's birthday dawned bright and clear, a perfect June Saturday. I woke early, too anxious to sleep past 6. After a quick shower, I spent extra time on my makeup trying to conceal the dark circles that testified to my restless night. I put on my navy dress, fastened the new silver earrings, and slipped into the modest heels I'd bought on clearance. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman trying her best to appear confident and composed, though inside, I felt anything but. The cake sat in its special carrier on my kitchen counter, alongside the photo display I'd created, showcasing Jackson's childhood. The small silver gift box was tucked safely in my purse. I called a rideshare service since parking near the boathouse was notoriously difficult and expensive. When the driver dropped me off at the restaurant, I was 30 minutes early, exactly as I'd planned. I wanted to help with any last-minute preparations and hopefully have a few moments alone with Jackson before the crowd arrived. The boathouse was even more impressive than I'd imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the sparkling lake, and elegant nautical decorations adorned the walls. A hostess directed me to the private room reserved for our party. When I stepped inside, I was surprised to find the room already fully decorated. Blue and silver balloons floated in clusters around the space. A professional-looking photo display much larger than mine stood on an easel, showing carefully curated images of Jackson, mostly from his high school and college years. Many featured Harold and Amanda, their perfect little family unit. Amanda was directing two servers as they arranged place settings on the long tables. She looked up when I entered, her expression shifting quickly from surprise to a polite smile. "Beulah, you're early," she said, coming over to air-kiss my cheek. At 39, Amanda was still strikingly beautiful, her blonde hair styled in an expensive-looking bob, her figure slim and toned, in a designer blue dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "I thought I might help with setup," I explained, setting down my cake carrier and the smaller photo display. "Oh, that's so sweet, but we've got everything under control. The party planners have been here since this morning," Amanda said. "But it's great that you're here. Jackson should be arriving with Harold soon." They went to pick up Rusty from the groomer. The dog was coming to the restaurant. Before I could ask, Harold's parents entered the room. Margaret and William had never been particularly warm to me, even during my marriage to their son, and the divorce had only increased their coolness. "Beulah?" Margaret acknowledged me with a nod, but quickly turned her attention to Amanda, exclaiming over the decorations and embracing her warmly. More guests began to arrive, and I found myself standing awkwardly to the side, clutching my purse. I recognized Harold's sister Katie and her husband, along with several of Jackson's friends from high school and college. Amanda's parents arrived, both of them giving me curious glances before being swept up into the family circle surrounding Amanda. Finally, Jackson arrived with Harold. My heart leaped at the sight of my son, handsome in a blue button-down shirt and khakis. Rusty trotted alongside him, sporting a blue bandana that matched the party decorations. For a moment, all I wanted was to rush over and hug my boy to tell him happy birthday, and how proud I was of the young man he'd become. But before I could move, Amanda intercepted them, throwing her arms around Jackson, while Harold looked on proudly. Guests clustered around, offering congratulations and petting Rusty, who was clearly enjoying the attention. Eventually, Jackson made his way to me. "Mom, you made it," he said, giving me a quick one-armed hug. "Of course I did. Happy birthday, sweetheart." I tried to keep my voice steady as I added, "I brought your favorite cake, the one Grandma used to make." "Oh, cool," he said, glancing over his shoulder as someone called his name. "I should probably go say hi to everyone. We'll catch up later, okay?" As Jackson moved away, I noticed servers beginning to direct guests to their seats. I looked around for my name card, checking several tables without success. Finally, a server approached me. "Ma'am, are you Beulah Martin?" When I nodded, he pointed to a table near the back of the room. "Your seat is over there." I made my way to the indicated table, which was positioned farthest from the head table, where I could now see Jackson taking his seat. On either side of him were Harold and Amanda. Even Rusty had a special spot nearby, a cushion placed on the floor with a dog-friendly birthday cupcake set before him. As I stood staring at this tableau, Jackson looked up and noticed my expression. "Come on, Mom," he called across the room, his voice carrying clearly. You always liked staying in the background. You're just back where you belong." A few people chuckled, including Harold. Jackson didn't say it cruelly, perhaps he even thought it was a joke, but his words hit me like physical blows. Back where I belonged. Was that truly how my son saw me? As someone who belonged in the shadows of his life? An afterthought, while the dog received a place of honor, I didn't say a word. I couldn't. Instead, I walked slowly to the head table, placed the small silver box beside Jackson's place setting, and turned away before anyone could see the tears threatening to spill from my eyes. The next 2 hours were among the most painful of my life, and I've endured childbirth, divorce, and watching my ex-husband marry his mistress. From my seat at the back table, I had a perfect view of the celebration from which I was effectively excluded. I was seated with distant acquaintances, people who knew Jackson only peripherally. To my left was one of Harold's co-workers who had met Jackson perhaps twice. To my right was Amanda's elderly aunt, who kept confusing me with a woman named Barbara from her bridge club. From this vantage point, I watched as Jackson laughed and joked with the guests seated near him. He seemed so at ease in this world of wealth and privilege that Harold and Amanda had created a world I could never provide on my librarian's salary. When it came time for speeches, Harold stood first, champagne flute in hand. 21 years ago, he began, our lives changed forever when this amazing young man came into the world. Watching him grow has been the greatest privilege of my life. He continued speaking about Jackson's accomplishments, his bright future, never once acknowledging that I had been there for every doctor's appointment, every school conference, every nightmare and fever and childhood fear while he worked late at the office even before the affair began. Next, Amanda rose to offer her toast. Though I haven't had the privilege of being in Jackson's life since the beginning, she said with practiced humility, these last 6 years have been such a blessing. Jackson, you've become like my own son, and I couldn't be prouder of the man you've become. Several of Harold's family members nodded approvingly. Margaret, my former mother-in-law, actually wiped away a tear. When Jackson stood to speak, I held my breath, hoping for some small acknowledgement. I want to thank everyone for coming today, he said, looking around the room. Dad, Amanda grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends. I'm so lucky to have such an amazing family supporting me. Not once did he glance in my direction. Not once did he mention his mother. I sat perfectly still, my face frozen in a smile that threatened to shatter at any moment. The cake arrived next, a magnificent 3-tiered creation decorated with fondant representations of Jackson's hobbies and interests. Everyone oohed and awed. My humble homemade cake remained in its carrier tucked beneath the gift table where a server had moved it. As everyone sang, "Happy Birthday," I noticed Rusty being led around to each table by Harold's niece collecting pets in praise. The dog stopped briefly at my table, and I scratched his ears, remembering how I'd been the one to pick him out at the shelter, how I'd trained him and cared for him during his puppy years before losing him in the divorce, along with everything else. When it came time for gifts, Jackson opened them with enthusiasm, exclaiming over each one. From Harold and Amanda, there was a set of keys to a new car. From his grandparents, an expensive watch. From friends, various gift cards and bottles of alcohol to celebrate his legal drinking age. The small silver box I had placed on the table remained unopened. Perhaps he hadn't even noticed it among the larger, more impressive presents. As I watched my son surrounded by wealth and attention, I realized with crystal clarity that I had become a footnote in his life. Despite my sacrifices, despite my unwavering love, I had allowed myself to be pushed further and further into the background until I was barely visible. The final breaking point came when Harold stood again, raising his glass for one last toast. To family, he set his arm around Amanda, his other hand on Jackson's shoulder. "To our wonderful, beautiful family." Jackson echoed, "To family," looking at Harold and Amanda with such obvious love and belonging that it felt like a physical pain in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't sit there for another moment pretending that this was okay, that being erased from my own son's narrative was something I could endure for the sake of peace. With trembling hands, I gathered my purse and stood quietly. No one noticed as I made my way to the head table one last time. Jackson was engaged in conversation with Amanda's father, laughing at something the older man had said. I touched the small silver box to ensure it was still there. Inside was not just the vintage watch, but a note I had written, expressing my unconditional love. How ironic that I had chosen a timepiece when time had revealed such painful truths about my place in my son's life. Without a word, I walked out of the boathouse. No one called after me. No one even noticed I was gone. In my car, finally alone, I allowed the tears to come. They weren't just tears of hurt, but of recognition. Recognition that I had spent years enabling my own erasure by accepting less than I deserved, by believing that self-sacrifice would somehow be rewarded with appreciation. My phone rang. It was Sarah. "How's it going?" she asked. "I left," I said simply. "I'll be at your place in 30 minutes with wine and chocolate," she replied without hesitation. As I drove away from the boathouse from the celebration of the life I had helped create, I felt something unexpected beneath the pain. A small, glowing ember of anger. Not bitter, destructive anger, but the kind that warms and empowers. The kind that says, "I deserve better than this," and for the first time in years, I believed it. For 3 days after the party, my phone remained silent. No call or text from Jackson asking where I had gone or why. It was as if my absence had caused no ripple in the celebration at all, confirming what I had already realized at the boathouse. I had become invisible in my son's life. On the 4th day, a text finally appeared. "Mom, where did you go the other night I opened your gift this morning? Call me when you can." I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the response button. In the past, I would have called immediately, eager to smooth things over to ensure Jackson didn't feel bad. This time, I set the phone down without replying. Instead, I called Dr. Martin, a therapist Sarah had recommended months ago, whose card had been sitting on my refrigerator untouched. "I think I'm ready to come in," I said when she answered. 2 days later, I sat in Dr. Martin's comfortable office, pouring out the story of the birthday party and the years of small erosions that had led to that moment. "What do you want for yourself, Beulah?" Dr. Martin asked after listening attentively. The question caught me off guard. For so long, what I wanted had been entirely tied to Jackson's happiness. "I don't know," I admitted. "That's where we'll start then," she said gently. Over the following weeks, I began a journey I should have started years ago. I reconnected with old friends who had fallen away during my marriage. I joined a book club at the library where I worked. I started taking evening walks, discovering parts of my neighborhood I had never explored. Jackson texted several more times, his messages growing increasingly confused by my lack of response. Finally, after nearly a month and several sessions with Dr. Martin, I felt ready to reply. "I'd like to meet for coffee this weekend," I texted back. "Just the 2 of us." We met at a small cafe halfway between our homes. Jackson arrived looking uncertain, the vintage pocket watch visible in his shirt pocket, which sent a pang through my heart. "Mom, what's going on? Why did you leave the party? Why haven't you been answering my calls?" I took a deep breath, centering myself the way Dr. Martin had taught me. "Jackson, I love you more than anything in this world. That will never change. But something needs to change in how we relate to each other." Calmly, without accusation or blame, I explained how I had felt at the birthday party. How I had felt for years, really gradually being pushed to the margins of his life. I told him about the cake I had baked that no one ate, about watching Rusty get more acknowledgement than I had, about hearing him toast everyone but his mother. "But that's just how you are, Mom," he protested. "You've always been quiet in the background. You never seemed to mind before." "Being quiet doesn't mean I don't exist, Jackson. It doesn't mean I don't deserve basic consideration and respect." He looked genuinely confused. "But you never said anything. You always just went along with whatever Dad and Amanda wanted." "That's true," I acknowledged. "And that's on me. I was so afraid of losing you completely that I accepted being treated as less than I deserve. I won't do that anymore." "What does that mean?" he asked, a note of alarm in his voice. "It means I'm setting boundaries. It means I expect to be treated with respect as your mother, which is a role that can't be replaced or erased, regardless of your relationship with Amanda. It means I won't attend family functions where I'm treated as an afterthought." Jackson was quiet for a long moment. "I never meant to hurt you," he finally said. "I know that," I replied. "But intention doesn't change impact." We talked for nearly 2 hours, clearing the air about many things that had gone unspoken for too long. There were moments of defensiveness from Jackson, moments of pain for both of us, but by the end, I felt we had reached a new understanding. In the months that followed, our relationship began to heal on more equal footing. Jackson started visiting me at my apartment more frequently, just the two of us. When he invited me to dinner at Harold and Amanda's house, I politely declined, suggesting we meet at a restaurant instead. I was no longer willing to enter spaces where my dignity was compromised. 6 months after the birthday party disaster, I moved to a new apartment in a different part of town, one that I chose entirely for myself rather than its proximity to Jackson's college. I painted the walls colors I loved, bought furniture that suited my taste rather than what was practical for a teenage boy, and created a space that reflected who I was beyond being Jackson's mom. When Thanksgiving approached, Jackson asked where we would be celebrating. In the past, I had always deferred to Harold and Amanda's hosting, accepting whatever time slot they offered me in Jackson's holiday schedule. "Actually," I said, "I'm hosting dinner at my place this year. Just a small gathering. You're welcome to join us if you'd like." "Us?" he questioned. "Sarah and her daughter, my friend Denise from the salon, and a couple people from my book club," I explained. To my surprise, Jackson came to my Thanksgiving dinner alone without Harold and Amanda. He arrived early to help me cook something we hadn't done together in years. As we worked side by side in my kitchen, I noticed the vintage pocket watch chain hanging from his jeans pocket. "You wear it a lot," I observed. "Every day," he said, pulling it out to check the time. "It reminds me of what's important." After dinner, as my friends chatted in the living room, Jackson helped me with the dishes. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly, unexpectedly, "for how things were before, for how I treated you at my birthday." "I know," I replied, "and I'm working on forgiving not just you, but myself too, for allowing it to happen for so long." "I found the note inside the watch box," he continued. "Time moves forward, but love remains. I think I finally understand what that means." I smiled, feeling the warm glow of reconnection, but also the strength of my newly established boundaries. Our relationship was healing, but on new terms that honored both of us. That night, after everyone had gone, I noticed something sitting on my coffee table. It was the small silver gift box I had left at the boathouse all those months ago. Inside was not the watch which Jackson now carried, but a note in my son's handwriting. "Thank you for teaching me what real strength looks like. I'm proud to be your son." I sat in my new living room in my new life and felt a sense of peace wash over me. The journey had been painful, but necessary. I had discovered that true love, the kind that sustains and nurtures requires not just generosity and sacrifice, but also self-respect and boundaries. Most importantly, I had discovered that I was more than just Jackson's mom. I was Beulah Martin, a woman of worth and dignity all my own. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love to find yourself again? What small moment helped you realize your own worth? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they deserve to be more than an afterthought in someone else's story. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to reclaim your place at the table of your own life.